So once again, I just want to remind everyone this meeting will be recorded today. If you have any questions, you can type them in the Q&A button by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, or you can type them in the chat. You could also click on the participants button, raise your hand, and you'll be able to ask a question. Once again, I just want to remind everyone this meeting will be recorded today. If you have any questions, you can type them in the Q&A. Okay. Sorry about that. So we are going live on YouTube actually today. Last time we went live on Facebook. Today we're trying something a little bit different. And we are joined here today by Ty Smith, Yim Wong, and also Lisa Ducharme. My name is Samalit Hogan. I'm the Regional Director for the Small Business Development Center. Welcome to today's webinar. Bring your team back safely and effectively to the workplace is the topic that we're talking about today. I want to thank all of the organizations that made this webinar possible, along with many other educational webinars that we've been putting together, including SCORE, the Massachusetts Small Business Development Center Network, including the Salem and Clark's, Salem University and Clark University, Center for Women Enterprise, Masco Capital Corporation, Valley Community Development, Common Capital, and the Franklin County CDC, as well as to our stakeholders, the Small Business Administration, the State of Massachusetts, UMass Eisenberg School of Management, and we're accredited by America's SBDC. So welcome everyone today. And without further delay, I'm going to ask Lisa to join us and share her screen so we can get started today. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Let me share my screen. Oh. Sam, can you see my screen? Yes, okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much, Sam. I appreciate that. And everyone on the Zoom and our presenters, Ty and Jim. We are excited to present our second webinar in the series of 3, Bring Your Team Back to Work, with Ty Smith and Jim Wong. I've been on a lot of meetings, Zoom meetings, in reference to how to bring folks back safely, specifically with Westfield State. And one of the things we're talking about is the safe openings. We get a lot of input because there's a lot of people involved, a lot of stakeholders as well as individuals. But many small businesses only have a few individuals. They can have, some of them only have 10, 15, or 20 team members. And some work from home while others were furloughed and some were running the business. So how do you bring them back? When I speak to businesses, they often say that they are inundated with information. Jim sent me Ty's guide, Bring Your Team Back to Work. And as soon as I read it, I agreed with Jim that it was a topic all businesses need to know about. And you're actually going to be receiving that guide. What are you seeing on your screen now? Sam or Jim, are you seeing Ty's picture now?
I'm seeing the first slide on bring your team back to work.
Okay.
Oh. There we go.
What are you just seeing his picture now?
Yes, you need to do the full slideshow so we can see it.
Okay. Okay, today this technology does not love me like it's supposed to. Give me another half a second. I'm gonna log right out and log back in. Sharing is stopped, okay. So give me one more second here so that we can get this up. And I truly apologize for this. Sam, now it's not letting me show, not letting me share the screen, Sam.
I'm here, Lisa. You should be able to go ahead and click on the button. It looks like it's starting. It's starting up again. We can
Okay.
see your screen, but we can also see the entire PowerPoint window.
Okay, we're just
so
gonna
if you
live
make
with,
all of the other stuff go away, like smaller, that should be fine.
what can you see now?
We can see your entire screen, like with the PowerPoint on it.
Okay.
It's okay if you want to just play it that way. Just continue the
Okay.
presentation. You're fine. You just
Okay.
have to click on the next slide. We'll just be able to see all of the slides in advance, but that's okay.
Okay. So Ty Smith is a native of Illinois. He enlisted in the United States Navy in 1996. He became a Navy SEAL in 2003, and he retired from the Navy in 2016. He has a bachelor's degree in organizational management from Ashford University and a master's degree in business from the University of Southern California with from the Marshall School of Business. You know, once he retired, he saw there was a need for the military, or he thought there was a need. So he used his military knowledge, skills, and abilities to launch Vigilance Risk Solutions, a San Diego-based technology company with a focus in conflict and violence prevention. Jim Wong is the Chief Operating Officer and Chief Strategy Officer for the Veterans Business Project. He is also chairman of the board for the National Veterans Transition Services, Inc. Jim is a naturalized U.S. citizen, and he offers both entrepreneurial startup and P&L experience in global corporations. He has a management consultant for the past 40 years, and he uses interdisciplinary and open systems approach to consult with CEOs and founders to improve organizational performance and viability. In all of his endeavors, Jim continues to apply and build on the leadership skills he gained in the Marine Corps as an officer and enlisted. And for 10 years, Jim, his wife Linda, and their partners owned and managed Pizza Hut franchises with 19 in Brazil. Ty and his team usually focus on medium and large businesses. However, we are at a time in which all businesses need to understand how to bring their team back to work with maximum safety and wellness. So Ty, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Lisa. I really appreciate being here today. Thank you everyone for calling in today. This is a really, really important topic. And I get fired up about this topic because a lot of people don't realize that conflict and violence in the workplace has absolutely been on a steady increase over the last 10 years. And as a result of the pandemic, conflict and violence in the workplace is going to continue to increase, and actually at a much more alarming rate, because we're so distracted, not just as a nation right now, but we're distracted in the workplace. So it's really, really important that we take the time out to actually sit down and have a very uncomfortable conversation regarding how to best bring our teams back to work with maximum safety and wellness, and how to protect our teams from all of the emerging threat trends that we're seeing evolve as a result of the pandemic. We're also going to talk about the long-term consequences and mental health that we're seeing develop as a result of the pandemic. You know, people are under a lot of stress right now, and it's causing some people to behave very sporadically. And we're going to talk about what small businesses should look out for in their employees, as well as what small businesses should look out for regarding how they're operating their businesses as we navigate our way out of this pandemic. And we're going to talk about some resources, some things that businesses can do in order to protect themselves and to safely navigate their way back into some form of a normal life as a business. Slide.
Ty, could you go ahead and please start your video?
I'm sorry?
Could you go ahead and please start your video?
Your screen is off. We can't see you.
I would prefer it that way, if that's okay.
Okay, so I'll turn everybody off then. Go ahead.
Sure. Okay, so this pandemic is actually creating opportunity for conflict and violence to find its way into the workplace. And that's because we're seeing a lot of new and emerging threat trends that are popping up as a result of the pandemic. And so some of these threat trends are rapidly finding their way into the workplace, especially depending on the type of company. For example, we saw in Brooklyn, New York in March, an example of an 86-year-old woman being pushed to the floor by another patient in a hospital because that patient didn't feel as if she were adhering to social distancing rules. So we have to assume that some of these risk variables are going to find their way into the workplace. Another example of that is what we saw with those two police officers being, coughed on by an alleged perpetrator simply because they were doing their job. So may not have been workplace violence for the alleged perpetrator, but it's absolutely workplace violence for the two officers that were involved in that particular situation. So like I said, people are under a tremendous amount of stress and people are behaving very peculiarly as a result of that stress. And we have to consider the fact that these risk variables can find their way into the workplace. We're going to talk about how to try to keep these variables outside of the workplace, because the idea is we want to bring our employees back to work so that they can work safely, free of the virus and free of worry. Slide. Thank you. So because of these new and emerging threat trends, we're also seeing that the pandemic is causing an increase in homegrown terror. As a nation, we're completely distracted right now. We're paying attention to the COVID-19 pandemic. We're also paying attention to the current civil unrest that's burning the nation right now. So we're not really forward leaning as far as what's on the horizon regarding external terrorism and homegrown terrorism. And recently, we received messages from the DOJ, letting us know, and this is public information, that homegrown terror cells, as a result of the distraction that's being created by the pandemic, are absolutely looking to accelerate attack plans right here in the United States, and that they're looking to find new ways to attack new targets because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And again, we have to worry about these threats finding their way into the workplace. So what this means for American businesses is that they have to be even more so forward leaning regarding the safety and security of their employees in order to keep them safe. Because when these organizations say they're finding new ways of attacking new targets, that could mean a myriad of different things, like attacks using COVID-infected saliva, and attacks using COVID-infected blood or people. We also have to be concerned with attacks that are specific to, say, for example, Asian-owned companies that have locations in the United States, because we're seeing a massive rise in xenophobia as a result of this pandemic. So again, businesses have to be extremely forward-leaning. Organizational leadership has to be forward-leaning regarding, hey, what kind of legislation is being put in place in order to combat this, and how is that legislation going to affect our policies and our business model? Slide. So we have to talk about how do we prepare our workplace, because it's going to be a lot more difficult for us to reopen a workplace and bring employees back to the workplace. It's going to be a little more difficult than we think. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to sit down, we have to take a look at, do our policies actually align with the new and emerging threats to our workplace? Because if they don't, we have to rebuild those policies. And if we don't have a policy, because maybe we're a small business and there are only 8 of us working, can we at least create a one-pager or a memo that can go out to our staff acknowledging what's actually happening and letting our staff know this is what we expect of you and this is what you should expect of us as we navigate our way through this pandemic and as we reopen the workplace. We have to take a look at, hey, what are we going to do with employees that are possibly sick? Are we going to allow them to continue to work from home? Are we going to create a flexible work schedule according to those particular employees and what their roles and responsibilities are? So what's most important is that organizational leadership start having this conversation about preparing the workplace ahead of time. We don't want to wait until we open a workplace, bring employees back to work, and then we figure this out. We have to talk about this now. How are we going to social distance, even if we only have 6 employees? How are we going to set up cleaning stations? Do we have to actually install barriers in between our workstations? These are conversations that need to be had now instead of after our employees come back to work. Slide.
Ty, I have a couple of questions here.
Sure.
So one of the questions is, for a lot of businesses, this is going to be their very first policy. And actually, this question can go to both you and Jim. But what does a transfer of information look like? For example, you know, should businesses plan to walk with their employees through the process, actually showing them exactly what to do and having them sign a document? What's the most effective way to do this?
Right. In my opinion, it is to practice completely open and completely honest communication with your staff, because as leaders, it's very easy for us to assume that we have to have every answer and we have to lead every initiative, but that's not the case. We hire extremely bright people to work with us, so we can't silence their voices. So the guidance that we are giving our clients, even the large cap companies that we're working with, is that you need to bring your employees in on this conversation, because they have fantastic ideas as well regarding how they are going to keep themselves safe at work. So organizational leadership can't make these types of decisions in a vacuum. Sit down with the team and hear everyone out, and let the team know, hey, these are the policies we're thinking about putting in place. What are your thoughts? So it has to be a group effort, in my opinion.
Yeah, let me add, as a small business owner, a restaurant owner, some of you, I notice, have put signs up on the window or on the door that say, no mask, no entry. Don't put it up like that, because it's not a traffic sign. You know, be friendlier and say something from the team that show that not only do you care for your customers, but for your employees. So put up a sign that's more gracious. Please wear your mask. We want to keep you safe and us safe. And sign it by the team, not management. So these are little things that help make your place a friendly place to walk into. And if you deal with people, as fellow human beings, you're probably going to get better reception, and do some role playing, because there are people who are going to come in without masks. Well, take a little bit of time, have your employees role play that so that they're prepared.
Do either of you think that it is necessary to have documentation to show that the employees were trained on proper procedures for PPEs, for health safety, those kind of things? Do you think that it's, because I know one of the things that we're looking at is actually bringing people in and showing them how to properly use hand sanitizer. And even though it seems like everybody knows how to use hand sanitizers, really, sometimes they don't know how to properly use them.
I think that it couldn't hurt. I think that's going to be depending on where the business is located, because every state has its own laws regarding, you know, the reopening of the workplace and what's going to be expected of the business owners. But I don't think that it could hurt if the business can actually afford to engage those types of services, so that they can create actual documentation regarding the steps that they took in order to safely reopen the workplace, different training policies that they put in place for employees. It's always a good idea for, you know, to cover the actual business in the event there is a problem where the business has to defend itself in a disposition. That's always a good idea to have documentation to show that you did the right thing. But I think what all of this comes down to is what I've said several times already, and we even heard Jim say it a few minutes ago. It comes down to communication, how employees are taught to communicate with one another and how employees are taught to communicate to the public. Like Jim said, you know, if you just put up a sign and it's basically saying wear a mask or keep away, then people are going to stay away from your business. If you teach your employees to communicate, you know, with people that are entering the business that way, then they're going to be running business off too. You know, one of the questions that you had that was related to this one was, well, what if, you know, someone comes into the business and they're not wearing a mask, and I have been taught as the employee that if they're not wearing a mask, that I can't serve that person. It all comes down to how that employee communicates that information to that particular customer. Because if the employee says it in a way that's very unempathetic and, you know, in a way that it seems like they don't care and they're just being rude, then the patron is going to take it that way, and the business's bottom line is going to suffer. But if the employee has been taught, ma'am, I'm really, really sorry. I want to help you, but please understand, like, I'm just doing my job. This is what I'm instructed to do. I don't want to lose my job. You know, I'm scared and nervous going through this just like everyone else. And I'm really sorry, but I have to ask you to put on a mask. I know it's a pain in you know what, but I'm just trying to do my job. There's a big difference between the employee communicating that way and, hey, you're not wearing a mask, so I'm just not going to serve you.
Okay, do either of you, one of the other questions was, should I have a paper trail? I know you somewhat answered it based on the law. But what's your thought on whether or not individuals should have a paper trail with the employees actually initialing a document and placing it in their files? Especially for businesses who are not used to having file folders or not used to having detailed employee files.
I think that it's going to be up to the business owners to actually do some research into what OSHA is requiring them to do in that particular state, because it's going to vary by state. You know, what Cal OSHA is saying that businesses in California have to do could be completely different from what OSHA in Texas is telling their small businesses to do. And I think it's also important that those business owners do research not only with OSHA, but with the CDC as well, because some of the CDC guidelines are becoming federal legislation. So it's going to differ regarding on the state that they're in. Me personally, as a business owner, I will always have a paper trail to protect myself as a business owner and to protect my business. But again, it's going to come down to the individual state.
And I think you're going to see within the SBA that they have a COVID-19 link that will keep people updated on what's required. So follow those rules. And I think it's more important to follow common sense. If you treat your customers as family, they will respond accordingly. That's a good way to thwart any potential threat. Last week, we said, put a smile on your face. You can put up a sign, there's a smile behind this mask. Those things tend to help reduce any potential violence in the workplace. And I'm like Ty, put it in writing for people to sign that they agree to have their temperatures taken when they come to work, so that everybody agrees. And that's part of the audit trail, that should anything happen, you can produce that document to say that as an owner, you did everything you could to make sure that everyone works in a safe environment and the customers are walking into a safe environment. So I think that's, you have to follow, what is the gracious thing to do to keep your customers, what makes your place more attractive than others, because you want to attract as many people as possible, including from your competitors. I mean, let's be honest, do the right things by your customers and they will come in. Word spreads very quickly. Oh, you should go to Ty's place because, wow, you really feel welcomed. So those things need to be trained into people. Don't expect that every employee is going to be thinking like that. Make sure you train them.
Thank you. Okay, Ty, back to you.
Awesome. So I turned my camera on because Jim made me look bad. Jim, you look great. So I figured I should turn my camera on too.
I love it.
In my opinion, the long-term consequences regarding mental health are potentially the most underappreciated aspect of this particular pandemic. So a December 2013 study published in the Journal of Research in Medical Sciences found that following a natural disaster, nearly half of the people that were polled reported some type of PTSD following this event. It is my professional opinion that nearly every human being, if not every human being, at least within first world countries, are going to experience some PTSD coming out of this event, because the COVID-19 pandemic has absolutely changed our everyday life. Even the average person that maybe works at Taco Bell, their everyday life is changing. Therefore, I think that every one of us is going to suffer some form of PTSD after this, and it's going to be up to employers to practice extremely forward-leaning and overt leadership in order to understand what's happening with their employees. Because what's really, really interesting is that this study was regarding natural disasters, instances like Hurricane Katrina, where a person's daily living activities were changed for a prolonged period of time. What's interesting about this is that this pandemic is lasting much longer than any of those instances. The changes to our everyday lives is lasting much longer, which means that we run a much higher risk of human beings coming out of this pandemic with PTSD. And we have to understand that PTSD comes from loss. We're grieving we're grieving something. I'm grieving the fact that I can't just get up and go to work every day and be around my colleagues like I normally do. That's playing games with my mind. And it's increasing our emotional stress over our population as a whole. And what we've learned from these instances where we suffered a major natural disaster is that these forms of PTSD will absolutely lead to an increase in emotional stress that leads to increased rates of suicide, increased rates of familial violence, and violence as a whole. What we're seeing with the civil unrest in the streets right now, people are under a tremendous amount of stress, and they're behaving that way because they are afraid. Slide. And it's also important to note that oftentimes human beings that have post-traumatic stress, they don't acknowledge it themselves, that they have post-traumatic stress for whatever reason. Maybe they feel ashamed, or they feel that they are unworthy because maybe they weren't a soldier that was deployed to Iraq. So they go, how can I possibly have PTSD? Well, we've learned that all human beings are capable of getting PTSD, whether you're a school teacher or you're a Navy SEAL. So it's going to be up to organizational leadership to make that acknowledgement for some of their employees that aren't willing to raise their hands themselves and say that they need help. Slide.
I think it might be useful to, when you're opening your first day, at the end of the day, have a debriefing session to find out how people are feeling. It's one way to signal to your folks, if there are things that the business could improve on to make it friendlier for employees and for customers. And it only takes 15 minutes to debrief when you close the door, and use those lessons for the next day and keep on getting better. That's one way to deter or make sure that people don't end up being stressed out. For a lot of the parents who are providing homeschooling, it may be tough to come back and leave the kids at home because they're used to now doing homeschooling. So those things add to stress. Make sure you think through those. Help your employees who have children that they're homeschooling on what are the alternatives.
Yeah, I agree. When it comes down to it, this is a time for organizational leadership to practice very intrusive and overt leadership. Employees have to see and feel that they are cared about. And again, oftentimes employees, Lisa, can you go back a slide, please? Oftentimes employees aren't going to feel comfortable voicing these concerns and actually going to their leadership and saying, hey, I think I might be suffering from PTSD. So these are some of the things that employers are going to have to be on the lookout for. If they notice that some of their employees, or even just one employee, is starting to isolate themselves, and maybe prior to the pandemic, they were an extroverted person. Those are very noticeable things. If you start seeing increased anxiety amongst your employees, if you're noticing that employees are behaving in a depressed manner, or if an employee looks like they're not sleeping or they're just short fused, these are things that it's going to be up to organizational leadership to, again, practice intrusive leadership so that they can actually notice when an employee needs help. And organizations should consider bringing some of those resources in-house if they can afford it. They should consider standing up employee assistance programs that are built around mental hygiene. And then also, for the much smaller businesses that may not be able to afford this, again, each state offers its own mental health resources for small businesses to take advantage of. And again, the CDC, OSHA are great resources. And Lisa, I know that you've also put together some resources for the small businesses that you're going to share with them as well.
Yes, they're at the end of the slide to include the Society for Human Resources.
Very cool. So continuing with preparing the workplace, this is a time where we absolutely have to take a look at the physical design of our workplace, because again, reopening the workplace and asking our employees to come back to brick and mortar locations and to work with one another is going to be much more difficult than we think. Tensions are going to be high. People are going to be uncomfortable. People are still going to be scared about, maybe I haven't lost my job now, but are we going to be laying people off again in the future? Is my job secure? People are going to be worried about, is the company secure, or are we going to run out of money and then everyone's going to lose their jobs because the business is going to run out of business. So tensions are going to be extremely high. This is a time where we have to take a look at where are our physical vulnerabilities. Maybe we had to lay off or furlough a bunch of employees that are not very happy with our decision. There's plenty of civil unrest in the streets right now. We have to worry about the possibility of that spilling over into the workplace. So this is a time for companies to consider what their physical security posture looks like and what their internal threat assessment teams look like, because again, it's going to be more difficult than we think. We also have to pay attention to how our workplace is designed. Even if we only have 6 employees, how much space are we going to require those employees keep between themselves? Are we going to require the employees to use certain protective equipment like masks when they're at work? We have to take a look at, are we going to prohibit group gatherings? And what happens if there is a group gathering right outside of our business? Are they close to any of our critical assets? So this is where building threat assessment teams and conducting things like security risk assessments can come into play. Because the idea is that, again, we have to keep as many of these risk variables outside of our company as we possibly can. And we need to have the very uncomfortable conversation right now regarding, are we going to install physical barriers within our workplace? Are we going to install cleaning stations? And are we going to build policy requiring employees to use them? We have to have those conversations now before we reopen the workplace. Slide. So we have to also pay attention to employee wellness. What happens when we reopen the workplace and we bring employees back to work? Again, this is going to be much more difficult than we think. We have to acknowledge the fact that ourselves, as well as our employees, listen, our leadership, we're not immune to any of these things that I'm talking about right now. I may be the CEO of my company. I may be a retired Navy SEAL, but I'm also a human being. I am susceptible to all of this external stress, just like everyone else is. So I have to understand that when I reopen my workplace and bring the employees back to work, my workforce could possibly be traumatized. I could have people within my workforce that's suffering from PTSD. So I have to be willing to accept lower productivity initially. Like Jim said, at the end of the day, let's sit everybody down and go, hey, how is everyone doing? How do you all feel now that we're back amongst one another? Who's nervous? Let's have these uncomfortable conversations so that we know how to make tomorrow better than today was. Leadership has to be willing to build new work from home policies. Hey, there are 8 of us working in this space, and maybe we're not going to have all 8 of us here every day at the same time. Maybe we're going to build policies that says that 4 of us will work in a space and 4 of us will continue to work from home. Or maybe we'll do that, you 4 work from home on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and us 4 work at the office, and then we flip flop on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Or maybe we build policies that say that, hey, we're all going to work from the office, but we're only going to do so for half the day. Or the guys I put out to my employees is that, hey, I understand we're reopening the workplace right now, but for us, for the next 30 days, that's up to you. If you feel comfortable coming back to the workplace, by all means, come back to the workplace. If you want to continue working from home for the next 30 days, that's up to you, and we will reassess at the end of this period of time. But again, have those conversations before you actually reopen the workplace so that you have a very good benchmark to start from. Because people are going to be afraid and people are going to be looking to leadership for guidance. So again, be very intrusive as a leader and have these conversations up front so that they don't wreak havoc on the organization. Slide.
In last week's webinar, we mentioned that you can survey your customers with 2 simple questions on a scale of 0 to 100. How much did we delight you? And then second question, what's one thing we can do better? Or you can do the same thing with your employees. Following an old tenet, we support what we help to create. Go around with your employees to look at the workspace and ask them, what should we be doing to structure a safe workplace? Is it buying some plexiglass that would help with the separation in space? Should we have a bottle of hand sanitizer at each workstation to make people feel like you care about them? Those are little things that will go very far in perpetuating good management practices. COVID-19 has made everybody learn faster. Take advantage of it. Take this opportunity to help each other think through, while other people may be trying to survive, how would we thrive in this environment? Last week, we talked about restaurants losing 68% of their sales in March, except those people who already had delivery channels set up. They actually gained 15% compared to the previous year. So preparation is key, and that's what this whole lesson is. Good preparation will take you farther and will help make your company even better than before.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. This is no different from what we were all taught to do in our military careers. This is simply contingency planning. That's all this is. And we always do contingency planning in the military, ahead of time. And that's all that we're saying to do right now. It's again, have these uncomfortable conversations ahead of time. Start working on these policies ahead of time, because it all comes down to open and honest communication. I've been beating that nail since we started, and I'm going to beat a little bit more with this slide here. We have to have these uncomfortable conversations with our team. Will the company survive? How are we doing? What are our clients saying? I think you were just saying that, Jim. These are the new safety and security policies that we've had to put together. What does everyone think about them? Are we prepared for the next wave if the pandemic comes back in the fall? Have those town halls with food. We call this management by walking around. Get out and actually communicate with your employees about relatively unimportant things, just so that they know that you're there, you're ready to have those uncomfortable conversations when they need them. The reason why this open and honest communication is so important, and I'll go on a rabbit hole here just for a second, is because if we don't have these uncomfortable conversations with our employees, then we're just opening up fear, uncertainty, and doubt within our businesses. And our employees are going to look everywhere else for information like the news, what are my friends down the street saying, and it's going to wreak havoc within your business. We're seeing it happen in the streets right now. People are wreaking havoc because we don't have clear and concise guidance regarding what caused the pandemic. When will the pandemic be over? Over 100,000 people have died in the US. When will that stop? How many more businesses will be shut down? Will I receive any kind of government stimulus? Fear, uncertainty, and doubt causes mental fatigue and stress, which causes people to behave in very strange ways. So that's why this open communication is extremely important.
So we have
and
a question.
remember what,
Go ahead, Jim.
sorry, Lisa. Oh, I was going to add, those of you who joined us last Thursday heard Fred Parrish, the author of the E-Myth, Chief Financial Officer, who's giving his book away, mentioned that every decision you make has a financial impact. So you're not trying to spend frivolously to improve your business. Think about the financial impact before you do anything. Get your employees to help you. A lot of the things I mentioned last week, the great ideas that ended up bringing lots of business back that I used were from employees. Most of them were from employees. And that's because if you show you care about them, they will care about you and your business. It's their business as well as your business.
No, exactly. So one of the questions is, we need to protect our employees, but we also need to protect our customers. And the question is, how is the best way to handle this? If you think about looking inward, you're looking at the people who work with you and your team. And if you look outward, you're looking at your customers. So in the communication aspect, what's the best way to make sure we take care of both of them?
Put out a memo. Put out a memo, a message to the public. Let the public know we're acknowledging what's happening right now. These are the steps that we are taking to protect ourselves and our employees. These are steps we're taking to protect our businesses. And these are the steps we are taking to protect you. You know, we talked a few minutes ago about, well, what happens if, you know, I'm required to not serve this person if they're not wearing a mask? Well, we have to start with the question of, did that person know that they had to wear a mask in order to enter that business and actually do business? So again, plan ahead of time, communicate with your employees, communicate with the public so that they understand. We just put together 3 or 4 new policies as a result of the pandemic. And of these policies, these 2 policies involve our customers. And so we want you to know that when you come here to do business with us, we're happy to see you, but you have to wear a mask.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Upfront
Thank you.
communication. Yeah. So continuing preparing the workplace. Again, this is contingency planning. This is getting ahead of things that could potentially cause a hiccup in our business model before they actually do that. So some businesses depend on things like raw materials. Some businesses partner with suppliers. Everything that we're talking to you about doing within your businesses, these are the conversations that you have to have with your partners. If you have a partner company that's providing you with your raw materials, these are answers that you need to have from them as well regarding what they're doing within their business in order to make sure that they're not going to create a cash flow problem for you because you are depending on this particular supplier, and now this supplier is shut down because they weren't doing all the things that they were supposed to do in order to protect employees and to protect their clients. So these are conversations that you also have to have with your suppliers. These are conversations you have to have with your subcontractors in order to make sure that, again, it's not going to create a problem within your business. Jim, do you have anything else to put out on that? I feel like you're much more versed in this particular part than I am even.
Yeah, there is a lot that you can do to let the public know you're running a very safe place. Put that memo on the window so people can read it as they walk. You know, I see a lot of pieces of paper taped to the window of businesses facing out. Most of it doesn't make sense to me. Put some meaningful information. You're trying to create an open atmosphere. There's never been a COVID-19 in recent history, so this is new for everybody. You cannot over communicate. You have to make sure that on a weekly basis, sometimes on a daily basis, if anything changes, communicate it internally, externally, and make sure that all the signage makes sense, because that's your communications.
I agree.
So another question in reference to the raw materials and suppliers, based on your experience, when we are in a new environment where something, even if you plan your raw materials and you know it's going to take 30 days, and the supplier tells you it's going to take 30 days, but in reality, we know that it's going to take 60 days. How do you actually prepare the workplace for something like that when employees are trained, and even as owners, we're trained to do things within a timeline, and sometimes the money is going to be the issue because we're waiting for these items, and then that puts us in an even bigger bind?
Well, let me address the money issue and put in a plug for the SBA. Those of you who have 7A loans or 504 loans or have microloans that are SBA guaranteed, you already know that the SBA is paying all your monthly principal, interest, and fees for 6 months. For those of you who have not thought about applying for those loans, you have until September 27th. Check in with your SBA, SBDC to find out. Maybe I could apply for a loan, and then the SBA will pick up all my payments for the first 6 months. I mean, that's money in the bank. So in dealing with suppliers, you know they're facing the same issues as you are. Cash is king. So do things that help each other and negotiate on payment terms. A lot of you may have government contracts, and make sure that you find out where is there some give in the cash flow system that you can capitalize on. And suppliers that are probably suffering just like you are will try to call you, email you, so that you can live up to whatever net 30 or net 15. Well, there are ways that you can help each other anticipate your future demand and get to know them much better than you might have known them before. get to know your banker, because right now that person is a friend. And some of you who have not applied for the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, apply for that. The CARES Act is designed to help people like us, small business owners, take advantage of all those things.
I agree. And in closing, on my side, slide, I'm sorry, Lisa. We actually offer some free resources that small businesses can actually take advantage of to do a lot of this yourself, because we understand that the smaller businesses don't have as much money as, say, Apple. I don't. I wish I did. So we created some guides that organizations can use. The first guide we actually released a couple of weeks ago, and Lisa is planning to share this with all of you, and that is the VRS guide, Bring Your Team Back to Work with Maximum Safety and Wellness Post-COVID-19. We're actually in the process of putting out our next guide, which I will make sure that these next two Lisa gets as well, so that she can share them with you. And that's going to be how to identify and mitigate some of these emerging threats of conflict and violence that we talked about already post-COVID-19. And then shortly after that, we're going to put out a guide to address the mental wellness aspect of this that we spent a while talking about. So we'll make sure that we get you all these resources. There are some step-by-step instructions in these resources regarding how to safely reopen your workplace and bring employees back to work. And there's also contact information in there regarding the CDC, OSHA, as well as us, in case you need to access any of our team for help.
Fantastic. And like Ty said, we do have a variety of resources on the back here. And then three of the articles that we shared last week, which are very, very helpful to individuals. We have the next Thursday, we have our Reshaping the Financial Narrative. And now we are at the end. It looks like we've answered all of the questions. Thank you so very much. Is there anything that either of you want to do before Sam takes over?
Well, you have our contact information. Feel free to email us, call us. If there's anything we can do, we're here. We're all in the same family. Most of us are veterans, military spouses, and we all own businesses. So whatever problems you're facing, it's highly likely we're facing the same problems. So let's work on solving those problems together. It's the old, if you want to go far, go alone. I mean, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Let's go together. Let's prevail. We talk about post-COVID-19. We don't know what the time duration is. So this is another rehearsal. Life is just nothing but a rehearsal, one after another. Let's keep getting better and better and better. And we comprise 9% of small businesses in America right now, veteran-owned businesses. And if you add in the military spouse-owned businesses, we're about 10%. So let's make sure that we do our share to maintain the strength of our American economy.
Yeah, and if there's anything I would leave to the group with, it would just be gratitude. You know, there's so much happening in the world today, and especially in our country, and it's so easy to think that everything is just wrong and bad right now, and there's just so much hate in the atmosphere. And I would just say that for me on a daily basis, there's plenty of that to go around, but the one thing that I can control, which is the only thing I'm going to worry about, is my own attitude. And so I like to focus on things that I'm actually grateful for. And I would just leave y'all with the fact that I'm really grateful to be a part of this group. I'm grateful to have mentors like Jim. I'm grateful that I now know people like Lisa that I can call up and be connected with businesses out, veteran-owned businesses out on the East Coast. And I'm really grateful that all of you cared enough about your team to actually call in today and get this information. So please focus on gratitude. There's a lot of negativity going on right now. I'm really grateful that I'm a part of this group, and thanks for having me today.
Here, here.
Thank you all so very, very much. Greatly appreciate it. Sam, it's on you now.
Yes, so I thank you, Lisa. So I do want to remind you again, we do have another webinar next week with Fred Parrish and Lee Goldberg, and it's going to be talking about reshaping your financial narrative. You won't want to miss it. This is another opportunity for you to learn from folks who have been there, done that, who can give you great advice on how to turn around your business. I want to thank again all of the organizations that have made these webinars possible. And I'm flashing on their screen their contact information for the folks locally here in the Pioneer Valley who are available to help you. That doesn't mean that if you are in the other side of the state here in Massachusetts that you can't call us. You can call us as well. The MSBDC has offices all throughout the state. There's an office at Clark University. There's an office at Salem State. My office is hosted by the UMass Amherst, and our website is www.msbdc.org. We're the Small Business Development Center Network here in Massachusetts, and you can reach out to us to speak with a one-on-one with a business financial advisor, and it's confidential. Again, one more time, there's other folks here in the region who are also assisting putting these webinars together. And once again, I want to thank the Small Business Administration for funding many of our programs, that all of the folks that are here and helping us putting together these webinars. The state of Massachusetts, UMass Eisenberg School of Management. Again, thank you so much to the New England Veterans Chamber of Commerce and Lisa and today's speakers for being with us today. Lisa, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, thank you so much to the MSBDC. You guys have no idea how wonderful they are. For anybody who has not had a chance or an opportunity to work with them, even though you came up on this webinar, if you have not worked with them, now would be a really good time. Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.